She told me her past was completely off-limits when I asked about a guy in her college photos. I was just curious about someone who appeared in multiple pictures with her during what seemed like important moments: graduation, family gatherings, summer trips, even what looked like intimate dinners for two at restaurants I recognized from our own dates. Madison and I had been together for 2.5 years, engaged for 6 months, and we were deep into planning our spring wedding at a vineyard outside Sacramento when I stumbled across these photos while helping her organize albums for our reception slideshow that would celebrate our journey together. We'd spent the entire evening going through boxes of memories, laughing at old haircuts and sharing stories about the people in various pictures, creating what I thought was a complete timeline of her life that I was now becoming part of understanding. I thought I knew everything about her romantic history because we'd always been completely transparent with each other about our past relationships. She'd mentioned a college boyfriend named Ryan who broke her heart senior year, and later dated some local musician named Jake briefly before we met through mutual friends at a 4th of July barbecue 2 summers ago. We'd always been completely open with each other about our pasts, sharing embarrassing stories about failed relationships and even laughing about awkward first dates we'd both survived before finding each other and realizing what real compatibility and partnership actually looked like. I'm a municipal water systems engineer for the city of Sacramento, pretty straightforward guy who believes in transparency and communication, especially when you're planning to spend your life with someone and merge everything from bank accounts to family traditions to long-term career goals and retirement planning. Madison works as a freelance event planner specializing in high-end weddings and corporate functions, and her attention to detail in relationships had always matched her professional perfectionism in coordinating events throughout Northern California for demanding clients. She knew everything about my past relationships, my complicated family dynamics with my divorced parents who still couldn't be in the same room together, my college mistakes including dropping pre-med for engineering, even my brief engagement to my high school girlfriend Sarah that ended when we both realized we wanted completely different futures and life paths. When I pointed to the guy in the photos and casually asked who he was, thinking it might be a cousin or close family friend I hadn't met yet during our 2 years together, her reaction was immediate and explosive in a way I'd never seen before from someone usually so composed and measured in her responses. She snatched the album away from me like I'd touched something radioactive and told me with cold finality that her romantic history was now completely off-limits and non-negotiable, using words that felt like legal terminology rather than the kind of open relationship communication we'd always practiced without any issues. The shift was so sudden and dramatic that I felt like I was talking to a completely different person than the woman I'd been planning to marry in 3 months, someone I'd never seen this defensive or secretive about anything, even small things like surprise party planning or gift purchases for special occasions. She established this as a firm boundary using language that sounded rehearsed and practiced, like she'd been preparing for this exact conversation and had her response ready for weeks or months, which made me wonder what other conversations she might have been mentally preparing for and what other information she might be strategically withholding from me. I respected her right to set boundaries because healthy relationships absolutely require them to function properly, but the abrupt change from total transparency to selective secrecy created an obvious power imbalance in our relationship that felt fundamentally unfair and one-sided in a way that didn't match our previous dynamic. If she could suddenly declare entire topics forbidden while expecting me to remain an open book about everything else in my life, from work stress to family drama to financial concerns and future planning, I decided it was time to implement some reciprocal privacy rules of my own that would level the playing field between us and restore some balance. I figured if mutual respect was really what she wanted from our relationship, then equal treatment was the logical next step. And I wasn't going to be the only one operating under complete transparency requirements anymore while she got to pick and choose what information she shared with me. The woman who had always known every detail of my day, every conversation with friends and coworkers, every work frustration and family drama, every financial decision and career concern, every plan I made or thought I was considering, was about to discover what boundaries actually felt like when they worked both ways and applied equally to both partners in what was supposed to be a balanced relationship built on mutual trust and respect. I decided that very night to mirror her energy exactly, and if she wanted to create information imbalances and selective sharing in our relationship, Then she was going to experience firsthand what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that treatment. From that moment forward, my entire life became as private and off-limits as her past, and I was genuinely curious to see how long it would take her to realize that boundaries are a two-way street that require equal participation and mutual respect from both committed partners. I started withholding details about everything the very next morning, beginning with something as simple as my daily routine and work schedule that she'd always known by heart. When Madison asked me about my plans for the day while we were having coffee, I gave her the same type of vague, non-committal response she'd given me about her boundary the night before. I told her I had work stuff to handle and left it at that, watching her face register confusion as she waited for the detailed breakdown of meetings and project deadlines I'd always provided without thinking twice about it. For 2.5 years, I'd shared every aspect of my professional life with her, from frustrating client interactions to budget constraints on municipal projects, from interdepartmental politics to engineering challenges with aging infrastructure systems, but now those details became as off-limits as her mysterious photo album friend. She tried asking follow-up questions about specific projects she knew I'd been working on, including the major water main replacement project downtown and the new treatment facility upgrades, but I deflected each one with the same polite but firm privacy that she'd established the previous evening. I started giving only basic responses about my weekend plans with friends, my conversations with family members, and even my thoughts about our wedding planning, treating all of it like classified information that required security clearance she no longer possessed. When she asked about my dinner plans with my college buddy Mark on Saturday, I simply told her I was hanging out with a friend and refused to elaborate on where we were going or what we planned to discuss, even though she'd always been included in those details before and had actually suggested restaurants for us in the past. Madison's frustration became increasingly obvious as the days passed, and she realized I was serious about implementing the same type of information restrictions she demanded for herself. She started asking more pointed questions, trying different approaches to get me to open up, from casual inquiries to direct confrontation about my sudden secretiveness, but I maintained my position with the same unwavering consistency she'd shown when establishing her romantic history as forbidden territory. I explained calmly that I was simply following her lead in creating healthy boundaries around personal information, and if she wanted privacy and selective sharing to be the new normal in our relationship, then I was perfectly capable of adapting to that standard and implementing it equally across all aspects of our communication. The woman who'd always known my schedule better than I did suddenly found herself completely in the dark about my daily activities, and I could see the realization dawning that she'd created a precedent she hadn't fully considered the implications of when she made her dramatic declaration about her past being off-limits. Her family members began getting involved within the first week, starting with her mother calling me directly to express concern about what she perceived as my sudden coldness and emotional withdrawal from the relationship. I explained to her mother that I was simply respecting Madison's desire for boundaries and privacy by implementing the same standards myself, but she accused me of being petty and immature for refusing to share basic information about my life with my fiancé. Her sister Emily tried a different approach, attempting emotional manipulation through guilt trips about how much Madison loved me and how confused she was by my sudden change in behavior towards someone I was supposed to marry in just a few months. I maintained my position that mutual respect required equal treatment, and if Madison wanted to establish information barriers in our relationship, then those barriers needed to work both ways to be fair and sustainable long-term. The tension escalated significantly as Madison realized she was losing access to information she'd always taken completely for granted, from my work frustrations to my family conversations to my future plans, and I could see her struggling to understand how her boundary about the past related to my current behavior and daily life decisions. After 2 weeks of living like strangers sharing an apartment, I temporarily moved to my cousin Danny's place in downtown Sacramento, telling Madison I needed some space to think about our relationship and where we were heading given the fundamental changes in our communication and trust levels. The physical separation seemed to trigger something desperate in her, and within days of my departure, she finally revealed the truth about the mysterious man in her college photos, but the reality was far worse than I could have imagined. He wasn't just some random guy from her past that she wanted to keep private, but a married real estate developer named Michael Harrison who she'd been involved with for 4 years in what she described as a complicated relationship that had overlapped with our entire time together from the very beginning. The revelation hit me like a freight train because it explained so many things that had never quite made sense about her behavior patterns and communication habits during our relationship, from her secretive phone calls to her unexplained absences and the expensive gifts she occasionally received that she claimed were from grateful clients. She admitted that the contact saved as blocked caller in her phone, the one that had been calling her at odd hours for months and causing her to step outside or go to another room to answer, was actually Michael, and she'd been maintaining regular contact with him throughout our entire relationship under the guise of friendship and professional networking in the real estate industry. The night before I moved out, she confessed that she'd met him at a wine bar downtown just 3 days after our photo album confrontation to discuss his pending divorce and what it might mean for their future together, essentially evaluating whether she should leave me for him. I felt physically sick learning that while I was implementing boundaries to save our relationship and trying to understand her sudden need for privacy, she was secretly meeting with her former affair partner to evaluate her options and plan her potential exit strategy from our engagement. My friend Jake, who bartends at the wine bar she mentioned, confirmed my worst fears when I called him to verify her story and get an outside perspective on what had actually transpired that night. He described seeing Madison at a corner table with an older man in an expensive suit, crying while he held her hand across the table and speaking in hushed, intimate tones that suggested they were much more than casual friends catching up over drinks. Jake remembered the interaction specifically because Madison had seemed so emotional and vulnerable, and the man kept checking his phone nervously throughout their conversation, like he was worried about being caught somewhere he shouldn't be or missing calls from his wife. When I confronted Madison with this additional information from an independent witness, she broke down completely and admitted that she'd sought comfort from Michael during our relationship crisis because he understood her complicated feelings in ways she claimed I never could or would. She revealed that their relationship had never truly ended when she started dating me 2.5 years ago, but had simply gone underground through secret text messages, occasional phone calls during his business trips, and these periodic meetings whenever he was having problems with his wife or feeling guilty about their affair. The pattern of lies and deception ran so deep that I realized everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been built on a foundation of dishonesty and divided loyalties that made our engagement meaningless. She'd been living a double life for our entire relationship, maintaining an emotional and likely physical affair while planning to marry me and merge our lives together, and the mysterious man in her college photos was actually her ongoing affair partner whose identity she'd been protecting through her explosive boundary declaration and dramatic reaction to my innocent question. The boundary about her past wasn't about healthy privacy or protecting herself from painful memories, but about concealing an active betrayal that had been happening behind my back for years. I realized that her sudden defensiveness and the rehearsed quality of her response made perfect sense now because she'd been preparing for the possibility that I might discover Michael's existence and start asking questions she couldn't answer without revealing the truth about their ongoing relationship. Learning about the ongoing deception and the recent clandestine meeting with her affair partner, I immediately ended our engagement and demanded the return of my grandmother's vintage emerald ring that had been in my family for 3 generations and carried deep sentimental value beyond its monetary worth. The ring represented more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of lasting love and commitment that Madison had proven herself completely unworthy of wearing through her years of lies and betrayal while planning to marry me. Madison's desperate attempts to salvage our relationship included promises to delete all contact information for Michael from her phone and social media, undergo couples therapy together with a professional counselor, and even suggested we postpone the wedding to work through our trust issues and rebuild our foundation, but I recognized that the pattern of lies ran far too deep to ever repair or move past. She begged me to consider that her affair with Michael was emotionally complicated rather than purely physical, as if that distinction somehow made her betrayal more forgivable or understandable to someone who had been completely faithful to our relationship for years. I methodically documented and removed my belongings from our shared downtown loft over the course of 2 carefully planned days, leaving her possessions completely untouched to avoid any legal complications or accusations that I'd damaged or stolen anything during our separation process. Despite her emotional breakdown that included hours of crying and begging, and increasing pressure from her family members who called me repeatedly to demand I reconsider my decision and give her another chance, I maintained my resolve to end the relationship permanently without any possibility of reconciliation. Her mother accused me of throwing away years of genuine love over what she called a simple mistake and momentary lapse in judgment, while her sister Emily threatened to tell everyone in our extensive mutual friend group that I was an unforgiving and emotionally abusive partner who abandoned Madison when she needed support and understanding the most. The manipulation tactics from her family were almost as disturbing as Madison's betrayal itself, showing me exactly where she'd learned to use emotional pressure and guilt trips to get her way in relationships when logical arguments failed to work. I understood that the core issue extended far beyond her boundary declarations or even the secret meetings with Michael. It was about fundamental dishonesty and her complete inability to commit to one person while maintaining emotional and physical fidelity throughout our entire relationship. The relationship officially ended when I realized I could never trust someone who had spent years perfecting the art of deception while demanding complete transparency from me, and who only revealed the complete truth when she was desperate to prevent me from walking away permanently after discovering her lies. Madison had proven that she was capable of looking me in the eye every day for years while maintaining an active emotional affair, and that level of calculated deception was something I knew I could never get past regardless of therapy or time apart to work on our issues. The fact that she could kiss me goodbye each morning while secretly planning meetings with another man, and then come home to discuss our wedding plans while hiding text messages from her affair partner, demonstrated a capacity for compartmentalization and emotional manipulation that I found genuinely frightening and disturbing. I realized that if she could maintain such an elaborate deception for years while we lived together and planned our shared future, there was absolutely no limit to what else she might be capable of hiding from me in a marriage where legal and financial entanglements would make escape much more complicated, expensive, and costly for both of us. The breakup became legally complicated with disputes over the lease on our Sacramento loft, shared furniture purchases, and $8,000 in non-refundable wedding deposits for our planned Napa Valley ceremony that we'd booked almost a year in advance through multiple vendors. Madison's family launched a comprehensive social media campaign portraying me as emotionally abusive and unstable, with her mother posting lengthy Facebook rants about how I'd manipulated and abandoned her daughter during her most vulnerable time of need and destroyed her faith in love and commitment. Her friends created coordinated group posts about toxic masculinity and abandonment issues, painting me as the villain who couldn't handle a strong woman with a complicated past, conveniently leaving out all the details about her ongoing affair and years of systematic deception that had actually caused our breakup. I consulted with a family law attorney named Patricia Wells who specialized in relationship disputes and cohabitation issues, and documented all harassment, including threatening voicemails from Madison's father about how real men handle complicated women and don't abandon ship when things get difficult or uncomfortable. Her father's messages became increasingly aggressive over several weeks, with him claiming that I was destroying his daughter's reputation and future happiness over what he called normal relationship complications that every couple faces at some point during their journey together. The wedding venue deposits became a particular point of contention, with Madison's parents demanding full reimbursement despite having no legal standing or financial responsibility for the contracts that Madison and I had signed together as equal partners. They argued that since I was the one ending the engagement and calling off the wedding, I should be responsible for all the financial losses, including the venue deposit, catering costs, photographer fees, and floral arrangements that totaled nearly $8,000 in non-recoverable expenses. I maintained that Madison's deception and ongoing affair had violated the fundamental basis of our engagement, making her responsible for the consequences of her choices and betrayal, but her family continued pressuring me through mutual friends and increasingly hostile social media posts. My methodical approach to documentation and my refusal to engage in public drama gradually shifted opinion among mutual friends who began asking for my side of the story after seeing the coordinated attack campaign against my character and reputation. Several friends reached out privately to ask what had really happened between us, expressing skepticism about the narrative that Madison's family was promoting on social media, especially given my reputation for being steady and reliable in relationships throughout college and my professional life. I provided factual information about the timeline of events and Madison's admissions about her affair when directly asked by close friends, but refused to participate in any social media battles or public character assassinations that would only escalate the situation and cause more drama. The legal documentation process revealed additional concerning patterns in Madison's behavior that I hadn't noticed during our relationship, including credit card charges at expensive restaurants and hotels during times when she claimed to be working late or attending professional events, suggesting that her deception had been even more extensive and systematic than she'd initially admitted during our confrontation. Her financial records showed a pattern of expensive dinners, overnight hotel stays, and luxury purchases that coincided with her secret communications with Michael, painting a picture of an affair that had been going on much longer and more intensively than she'd confessed. The attorney advised me that Madison's ongoing deception constituted a material breach of our relationship contract, and that her family's harassment campaign could potentially be classified as defamation if they continued making false accusations about emotional abuse and abandonment without factual basis. The most disturbing aspect of the legal process was discovering through phone records and financial statements just how extensive Madison's double life had actually been throughout our entire relationship. Credit card receipts showed romantic dinners at upscale restaurants on nights when she told me she was working late, hotel charges during weekends when she claimed to be attending professional conferences, and expensive gifts purchased with joint funds that had never appeared in our apartment. The pattern revealed that her affair with Michael hadn't been the occasional emotional connection she'd initially described, but a full-blown parallel relationship complete with romantic getaways, expensive dates, and intimate encounters that had been happening regularly for years. I felt genuinely sick realizing that while I'd been faithfully planning our future and saving money for our wedding, she'd been using our shared resources to fund romantic escapades with another man who was cheating on his wife. The financial evidence also revealed that Michael had been giving Madison expensive gifts and paying for many of their encounters, suggesting that their relationship had elements of financial support that made her betrayal even more calculated and deliberate than simple emotional infidelity. I learned through Michael's ex-wife Rachel that the real estate developer had a documented history of multiple affairs, with Madison being just one of several long-term extramarital relationships he'd maintained simultaneously over the years while married and claiming to love his family. Rachel reached out to me not for revenge or to cause additional drama, but to warn me about Michael's manipulative patterns and to thank me for inadvertently providing crucial evidence for her divorce case through the detailed timeline I'd established with my attorney. She explained that Michael had a specific type of woman he targeted for affairs, typically younger professionals in their 20s and early 30s who were impressed by his wealth and status, and that he used the exact same playbook with all of them, including expensive gifts, romantic getaways, and promises to leave his wife. The divorce proceedings had revealed extensive financial evidence, including credit card statements for expensive jewelry, weekend getaways to Lake Tahoe and Carmel, and regular payments to Madison's event planning business during their affair that totaled nearly $15,000 over 2 years of their secret relationship. Rachel showed me copies of Michael's credit card statements that demonstrated a disturbing pattern of lavish spending on multiple women simultaneously, with Madison receiving expensive gifts including designer jewelry and luxury handbags while he was also funding romantic getaways and expensive dinners with at least 2 other women during the same time period. Madison briefly reunited with Michael after his divorce was finalized in late spring, moving into his upscale Roseville home and posting Instagram photos that made it seem like she'd finally found her fairy tale ending with a wealthy man who could provide the luxurious lifestyle she'd always wanted and felt she deserved. The relationship lasted exactly 6 weeks before she discovered him messaging his young administrative assistant Sarah through private social media accounts, exchanging intimate photos and making detailed plans for secret meetings during his upcoming business trips to Los Angeles and San Francisco. Rachel contacted me again when Madison's relationship with Michael imploded spectacularly, explaining that she felt obligated to warn me that Madison was likely to try reconnecting with me once she realized that Michael would never be faithful to anyone and that she'd made a terrible mistake leaving our stable relationship. She described finding Madison crying hysterically in the parking lot of Michael's office building after confronting him about the assistant, and how Madison had begged her for advice about whether men like Michael could ever change their patterns or if she was foolish to hope for commitment. The ex-wife told Madison bluntly that Michael had been cheating on her throughout their entire 15-year marriage with multiple women, and that Madison had been incredibly naive to think she would be different or special enough to reform a serial cheater who had never been faithful to anyone. Madison's relationship with Michael ended when she found explicit photos on his phone from his assistant and realized that she'd been played by someone who was even more skilled at deception and manipulation than she was, leaving her financially dependent on her parents again and emotionally devastated by experiencing the same type of betrayal she'd inflicted on me. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison had destroyed our relationship to pursue someone who treated her exactly the way she'd been treating me, using her for emotional support and physical gratification while maintaining other relationships, and who discarded her the moment he found someone younger and more interesting to manipulate and control through false promises. According to Rachel, Madison had discovered through Michael's phone that he'd been running the same manipulation tactics on her that he'd used on multiple women over the years, including identical text messages and the same romantic restaurant locations for different affairs. The patterns were so systematic that Rachel suspected Michael kept a playbook of successful manipulation strategies, recycling the same lies and promises with each new target while maintaining multiple relationships simultaneously. Madison's event planning business suffered significantly during this period, as her emotional instability and the public nature of both breakups damaged her professional reputation among Sacramento's social circles where discretion and reliability were essential for success. Several high-profile clients canceled their contracts after witnessing Madison's dramatic social media meltdowns and erratic behavior during the aftermath of her relationship with Michael, costing her thousands of dollars in lost revenue and future referrals. The woman who had once prided herself on being sophisticated and in control of her destiny found herself financially dependent on her parents at age 28, living in their spare bedroom and trying to rebuild a career that had been derailed by her poor personal choices and inability to maintain professional boundaries. Rachel mentioned that Madison had asked her multiple times whether she thought I might be willing to talk to her again, and whether someone like me could ever forgive the type of betrayal she'd inflicted during our relationship, but Rachel had been honest that most people don't get second chances after demonstrating such calculated deception over years. 8 months after our breakup, I reflected on my decision with complete confidence and zero regrets, having avoided what would have been a marriage built on fundamental deception and unequal power dynamics that would have made me miserable for years while enabling Madison's manipulative behavior. My approach of mirroring Madison's energy and implementing reciprocal boundaries had successfully revealed her true character before legal and financial entanglements made separation significantly more complicated, expensive, and emotionally draining for both of us. While working through trust issues with a therapist named Dr. Jennifer Martinez, I developed much clearer standards for future relationships, specifically seeking partners who viewed vulnerability and open communication as strength rather than weakness to be exploited for personal gain. I'd learned that someone who demands complete transparency while withholding crucial information themselves isn't someone capable of building the kind of partnership I wanted, where both people contribute equally to emotional intimacy and shared decision-making about their future together. Madison's life had spiraled significantly during those 8 months, with her event planning business failing due to her emotional instability and damaged reputation throughout Sacramento's professional networks, her savings completely depleted from the expensive lifestyle she tried to maintain with Michael, and her social circle reduced to family members who enabled her victim mentality instead of encouraging accountability. Through mutual friends, I heard that she'd been forced to take a part-time retail job at a department store to help pay her parents' bills, a dramatic fall from the sophisticated professional image she'd cultivated during our relationship when she was using my stability and financial support as a foundation for her success. My brother David commended my patience and strategic thinking when I told him the complete story during a weekend visit, noting that the temporary discomfort of enforcing boundaries had prevented years of potential manipulation and dishonesty in a marriage that would have been doomed from the start. He pointed out that Madison's explosive reaction to my innocent question about the photos had been an unexpected gift, revealing her deceptive nature and capacity for compartmentalization before I'd invested even more time and money in a relationship that was built entirely on lies and false pretenses. The wedding deposits we'd lost seemed completely insignificant compared to what a divorce would have cost, both financially and emotionally, especially considering that Madison had proven herself capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions for years without showing any genuine remorse or guilt about her betrayal. I'd started dating again after 6 months of therapy and careful self-reflection, meeting women who actually appreciated honesty and consistency rather than viewing those qualities as boring or controlling like Madison had toward the end of our relationship when she was comparing me to Michael. The contrast was remarkable when I met someone who actually wanted to know about my work projects, my family relationships, and my future goals instead of treating those conversations as tedious obligations to endure while secretly planning meetings with other men. I realized that Madison's affair hadn't been about Michael specifically or his wealth and status, but about her fundamental inability to commit to one person and her constant need for validation from multiple sources, which meant that even if she'd chosen me over Michael, she would have eventually found someone else to fill that role. The boundary experiment had taught me that people reveal their true character when they can't control the narrative or manipulate the power balance in relationships, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to save someone who doesn't actually want to be saved or changed. Madison had made her choices based purely on what she thought would bring her immediate gratification and financial security, and when those choices backfired spectacularly, she'd learned firsthand what it felt like to be betrayed by someone she trusted and invested in emotionally. The woman who had destroyed a stable relationship for the promise of luxury and excitement found herself alone, broke, and professionally damaged, while I had moved forward with a clearer understanding of my own worth and what I deserved in a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine commitment. Looking back, I recognized that Madison's boundary declaration about her past had been a desperate attempt to prevent me from discovering the truth about her ongoing deception, but ironically, it had given me the perfect opportunity to test her character through reciprocal treatment. Her inability to handle the same privacy restrictions she'd imposed revealed her fundamental selfishness and entitlement, showing me that she viewed our relationship as a one-way arrangement where she received all the benefits while contributing minimal emotional investment or loyalty. The therapy sessions had helped me understand that my decision to mirror her energy wasn't petty or vindictive, but a healthy response to manipulation that protected my own emotional well-being and prevented further exploitation. Dr. Martinez explained that people with Madison's patterns often target partners who are naturally giving and accommodating, using their kindness as a weakness to exploit rather than a strength to appreciate and reciprocate. I'd learned to recognize the red flags I'd missed during our relationship, including her tendency to deflect accountability, her pattern of comparing me unfavorably to other men, and her skill at making me feel grateful for basic relationship courtesies that should have been automatic. The experience had taught me that healthy relationships require equal investment from both partners, and that someone who isn't willing to be vulnerable and transparent doesn't deserve access to your own vulnerability and transparency. Madison's downward spiral had continued even after her relationship with Michael ended, with reports that she'd been struggling with depression and anxiety while living with her parents and working in retail after losing multiple event planning clients. I felt a distant sympathy for her situation, but recognized that her consequences were the direct result of choices she'd made repeatedly over years, not a temporary lapse in judgment that deserved forgiveness and reconciliation. The boundary experiment had ultimately saved me from a lifetime of uncertainty and betrayal, allowing me to find someone who valued the same things I did and who viewed our relationship as a partnership rather than a transaction or convenience arrangement.